So here's our basic earnings per share calculation. And if I'm an owner, if I'm one of these common shareholders, this is great. Thank you very much for sharing this information with me. But do you have any other than contingently issuable shares, right? Which are generally part, and there has to be a there really has to be a compelling reason why those will be issued. Not that they might be issued, that they will be issued, and that the contingency will be met. But that those contingently issuable shares go in a basic earnings per share calculation. But there are probabilistic obligations that I have. And so if I'm a common shareholder, this is great. But what if all of the other contracts that you've written out there that might issue more common shares, what happens if all of that stuff happens? What's my earnings? What is my, because remember, this is earnings per share. Well, what's my earnings per share if all of a sudden you issue all those new shares based on the existing contracts that exist? I really want to know. I want to know how my denominator is going to change. So if this changes, it's also possible that some of this happens. I'll just give you a quick example before we get into how we do all this. What if the preferred shares that I have and that I've been paying dividends on, what happens if that's convertible to common stock? Well, wouldn't the common shareholders know that, well, what would have happened what would my earnings per share have been this year if those convertible preferred shares had converted and they were now not preferred stockholders, but they were common stockholders? How would that work? Well, if that's the only thing I've got going on, I can tell you right now how that would work. In the numerator, if we assume that the preferred shareholders were common shareholders at the beginning of the year, then we wouldn't have paid this dividend. And it would just be net income. And so in the numerator would go up. And then in the denominator, we would have to calculate how many common shares each preferred share would get. And we would have to add that to our weighted average. This additional earnings per share, it's no longer basic, tells the current common shareholders how potentially diluted their earnings are given some of these other contracts that also exist that the company wrote, whether it's for employment contracts or to raise other types of capital. But it tells the current common shareholders, okay, this is basic. But if everybody all of a sudden exercises their conversion rights or exercises their options or whatever contract I've written, your earnings per share might be lower.